Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ace Marks the Spot. Uh, I'm joined today by a special guest, and he's the first guest ever on Ace Marks the Spot. We've got Noops all the way from America. How are you today, Noops? Or sorry, how are you this evening, I should say?
That's right. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, Steve. Hanging out, enjoying a little bit of basketball. This Raptors-Bucks game has been a lot of fun. A lot more fun than the tennis we've had in Mexico so far. Sloane Stevens just finished. We'll talk about that in a second. The Bucks and the Raptors playing tonight, what could be an Eastern Conference Finals preview. Giannis looked really good. Toronto had control early, but it looks like the Bucks are going to get it done. How are things? I guess it's early in the morning where you are.
Uh, no, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So
Oh,
also
okay.
had a
I'm terrible.
kind
I
of
never
been.
have any idea what time it is where you are. So I always
That's all
tell
right.
everyone you're asleep.
We normally get forgotten down here in Australia. People only really know what's going on here in January if you're a tennis fan, because you need to know what time to get up to watch the action in the Australian Open. But yeah, no, just been watching some little bits and pieces of Acapulco. Had a bit of a late night last night watching some of the action from Doha. So it's a bit of a funny time of year for the Australian viewers of tennis, but certainly a lot of action to kind of get my head around. But you're right, Acapulco was a little bit surprising today, I think, on a number of levels with a couple of results. So what we might do is, as I got down just the bottom there for anyone who is watching along, if you have any questions or anything, we might go through them a little bit towards the end of the Periscope. But we might get started with just a little bit of a recap of Acapulco. Uh, what stood out to you most today, just from your quick look over the results that we've seen so far? I feel like you might be starting perhaps with one Sloane Stevens.
Yeah, it's at the same time, I talk about how surprising things are, but this is kind of exactly what I wrote about in my preview. This tournament just looked like a mess. It was just this weird group of names. It's not a lot of names that you see normally playing together. Some big names, some really small names. And none match more different than Sloane Stevens and Zarzua here. I mean, the two of them would never play unless Zarzua is getting a wild card into this event, and here we are. The number one seed Sloane Stevens loses 4-2. And
Hmm.
I was laughing before we got on here. The WTA tweeted out that they were shocked. The world was shocked that Sloane Stevens lost. I don't think that anyone here on this broadcast or listening, hopefully, was shocked. I mean, this is what Sloane Stevens does now. She doesn't seem to care too much about tennis for whatever reason. I don't know. She
Yep.
looks a little out of shape. She looks disinterested. The
Yep.
player that was an incredible threat a year and a half to 2 years ago, it doesn't seem to be here anymore. So I don't know, Steve. Were you shocked, or was I speaking out of turn for you?
I don't know if shocked would be the term to describe it. I think you know what, there's having a ranking and then there's playing to your ranking, and I think we can all agree at the moment that Sloane probably isn't playing anywhere near her ranking. She's almost having a little bit of a year, a bit like Francis Tiafoe, I guess, on the men's side last year, where you can be reliant, and your ranking is heavily reliant on a couple of results. And once those results pop off your ranking, 12 months later, that's when you start to see a bit more of a truer reflection of form and where a player is at. But it does raise an interesting question, because you think with Sloane, she's been at the top of her game. She knows, she's won a Grand Slam. How much opposition analysis do you think she would have done for a match such as today, or does she just think that she goes in and goes, well, you know, I've been there, done it all before. I can, my best will win. Do you think she's perhaps one that could be a bit more complacent?
Yeah, absolutely. I think based on what we've seen, based on where she is in her career, I think that's absolutely what we're looking at. It's someone that is, I mean, just apathetic is the word that comes to mind. You're right. There doesn't seem to be a plan. There doesn't seem to be a level of effort. The sharpness is not there physically. It's not there
Hmm.
mentally. And, there's very few players that are talented enough to deal with not having either one of those, let alone both. So,
Yeah.
again, we just continue to watch her struggle and struggle and struggle. And it just, this draw, you start to look at it. I mean, I'm going through, we basically have most of the second round here. And as you start to look at the top, our second round in a WTA International is going to be Zarzua, Volnitz, Zadancic, Yvonne, Tatana Maria, Potapova, Leila Fernandez, now Habino, Heather Watson, Catherine Bondarenko, the winner of Arconda Dolhide, the winner of Mikhail Davis. Then
Hmm.
we'll have Lin Zhu, Katie Balter, Sarah Arani, and Jiu Wang. I mean, that's an ITF tournament.
I think when you think about it, I think there are a lot of comments made about the tournament in Thailand the other week, but that is starting to rival it, I think. I mean, it's a great opportunity for a number of those players for, an international WTA tournament, but it's, I guess, something to consider that when you think about the ranking points that will go on to a number of these players for the next couple of months, that you know, do you hold as much weight to a title here as you would against, thinking about Simona Halep's last week in Dubai?
Yeah, and one thing to add there, I started to look. I'm trying to see how many seeds here. So the 1 seed's out, the 2 seed is out, the 3 seed is out. Let me see. Where did I find the 4 seed? The 4 seed is the 4 seed still alive? Maybe the 4 seed withdrew. No, the 4 seed is Lauren Davis. She still plays. So the 4 seed's still in. 5th seed's out. 6th seed is out. You just have the 7 seed basically
Mm.
left. It's just a mess, and it's, again, not to take anything away. I mean, there's a lot of players that we like in here. I mean, we love Yvonne. We're big Zidancic fans. We like Potapova. Layla Fernandez is great.
It's good to see Katie
Jia
Bolter back
Wong
on tour.
is as good as anybody, right? Katie Bolter's playing tennis again, so it's not necessarily to take away from the players that are here, but just to kind of speak to you. You start this tournament again. Sloane Stevens is here, Venus Williams is here, Wang Yifan's here, and then you start to look at this, and again, we thought it was going to be a mess, but I didn't even think it was going to be this messy.
Mm. And I think it can be tricky, and that we can talk about some of the more senior, more experienced players on tour that have come here for an opportunity. I guess one that we've, made comments on in the past. You look at Sara Irani, for example, who, you know, 12 months ago, or even since her ban and return to tour, you just wouldn't have expected to really see her back at this level, considering what we saw with her struggles at the end of last year, the underarm serving, the everything that came with that, to now come out and to beat Nicole Gibbs. I think it was 6-love in that final set there, and to come
Yeah.
out today and beat Sorribes Tormo. Granted that they're probably friendly matchups for her, or as friendly as they can be. I guess if you think back to when she was at her best on clay, she could kind of grind down and wear out some of those bigger hitters. But as everything has dropped off for her, perhaps now it's just those players that are perhaps a little bit wayward and not the strongest hitters is probably right in her wheelhouse at the moment. And she's been able to take advantage of it and keep herself in a pretty decent ranking, considering her struggles. Did you picture something like this happening for her this week?
No, I didn't. I could see her maybe making some noise at some clay events, and maybe a smaller event like this. And it's like you said, you look at those matchups. I was really disappointed to see Gibbs not just lose, but lose like that. But then you look
Mm-hmm.
at the Tormo matchup. I mean, I made a couple joking tweets out to people. I mean, that's a match they could have canceled. What a mess! The two of them are actually playing each other, and Irani's, just say what you will about her, physically has just about as close to zero power. Again, was serving underarm for long portions of the season last year.
Mm-hmm.
A professional tennis player. I mean, and winning matches somehow serving underarm. So it does speak to her craftiness, to her ability to move around, or to work for points. And I think that's what we saw today. I mean, just
Yep.
watch the two of them. I think there was how many breaks of serve? There was 10 or something like that in the first set, maybe 9.
Yeah, 9 in the
It's
first
just
set for a 7-5.
yeah, just outrageous. I mean, just to have the mental fortitude, frankly, to go out there, knowing you're going to get broken and being able to hold on and get the break back on the other side and come out of that mess with a 7-5, 6-4 win. So,
Mm-hmm.
that was a pretty nice match for her. I think it's fun to see somebody like that we're constantly surprised by. But let me see who she's got in the next round here. It'll be hard not to be back in whomever it is she's playing, because again, I guess she'll get a little bump here for having played qualies and stuff. Yeah, she gets Jiu Wang, the youngster who
Yeah.
I don't think will have any problem holding serve against her. So I think things might
No.
get a little ugly there. I'm curious to see what number the market hangs. Again, we're talking right now, there's no prices for that matchup quite yet. The Irani match finished, I think, just maybe within the last hour. So
Yeah.
I'll be looking at Wang there.
Mm. And I guess one of the other results that stood out to me from today, I mean, it may not have been the final result that is the surprise. It's probably the way in which we got to the final result. I think Yvonne against Venus Williams, Venus down a break multiple times in that first set, comes back and takes control, takes that first set 6-4. move into that second set, and Yuvan saves 7 match points on her serving to stay in it, takes the tiebreak and goes on and knocks Venus Williams out.
It was an incredible match. I mean, Yuvan is somebody that I wrote a lot about in my preview, and that I really wanted to get one of the qualifier spots in the third or fourth quarter of this tournament. I thought
Yep.
she'd be a real threat to win it. And, I was worried she'd get stuck in that first quarter. Venus in the first round, somebody who, I think she could beat, and the market did too. I mean, match was lined pretty close to a coin flip, basically. But, same quarter, Shelby Rogers, who I thought would be competitive. Shelby lost today to Katie Volnitz. Same quarter as Stevens, who, I didn't feel great about. At the end of the day, though, you kind of have to respect the name and the talent. And it was just to watch her get put in the middle of that was kind of a mess. But, again, things have now opened wide up. Now her quarter consists of her, Zidansek, Volnitz, and Zerzua. She's the best player out of that group. And then, the winner of that second quarter, maybe Potapova, maybe Fernandez, maybe even Habino. Shouldn't be a problem there. She's just in a really great spot to win this tournament. And you have to be proud of her. I mean, faced 3 match points on her serve, was able to hold on to those, win the second set in a tiebreak. I mean, in a tiebreak against Venus Williams, one of the better tiebreaker players of all time in the women's game. There's somebody that, Yuvan probably grew up watching a lot in tiebreaks. And then, takes her to task 6-2 in that third set. And Venus Williams is 39 years old. A player like Yuvan is smart enough and should be able to move around. These courts aren't terribly fast, from what we know. So the result itself isn't too surprising. But like you said, the way that it happened is something I think we really need to remember and think of. And, as a player that I know you and I are excited about, a lot of our friends are excited about, this could be, something that, kind of sticks out in that path of hers. You're doing one of those timelines of her career. You'd probably put a little dot there on February 25th and, call out this match, because I thought it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think my initial worry for her this year was she did have that ankle injury at the end of 2019. I think she was playing an ITF for one of those challenger events and really badly hurt her ankle. And I thought that might have actually slowed down her start to 2020. I actually saw her. I got to sit courtside and watch her play Storm Sanders. I think it was in the Australian Open qualifying, and it was impressive, her ability to be able to stem the bleeding, particularly I think once she fell behind in that second set, and to be able to flip the script and take control again. There wasn't a big crowd there, but it was a home crowd for Sanders, and she just looked very composed and handled the occasion quite well, considering we're looking at Australian Open main draw qualification on the line there. Obviously things didn't go well for her in the main draw there, but the way I look at this top half, as you said, I'm looking at Yuvan and I'm looking at Potapova kind of as those two players who can really take advantage here. And I mean, Potapova, for those who are listening or watching, I was obviously someone who took Potapova yesterday against Schmiedlova at the minus 2.5 games, and at 4-6, love 4 breakpoint down. It wasn't looking great, but I guess she's now waking up today and looking at these results and thinking, well, what an opportunity.
Oh, she must be, and she's the kind of player. Again, it's amazing. We're talking about 18-year-old girls. We talk about these for the most part. I try to use the word woman, but I just want to be clear. These are 18-year-olds. They'd be in high school, barely in university, if you will. And just the mental composure, to take a step back when I evaluate tennis players. At the end of the day, they're professional athletes. They all have certain physical gifts. Obviously, some have more gifts, some have less. But I think time and time again, what we see is the ones that have that mental fortitude, the ability to be in situations like that and not break down, to keep trying, to keep working, to keep trying to come up with creative things to do to throw your opponent off. And I think Yuvan has a little more of that than Potapova does, but Potapova does have that. I mean, she's down. She just has an unbelievable amount of confidence in herself. She always thinks she can win every single point. And that's scary, man. I mean, especially with someone as much talent as her. We talk about the concept of redlining a lot. And when she's hitting the ball where she wants to hit it, she can beat a lot of players.
Yeah. And I think I wrote about it the other week. It was interesting. I think it was in St. Petersburg. She gave an interview, I think, with the WTA website there. And she was talking about how her loss to Coco Gauff at the US Open kind of was a bit of a wake-up call for her. because she was playing so well and then kind of found herself tuning in and out of the match a little bit, and that she was struggling to kind of lock in for long periods of the match. But then seeing the likes of Andreescu win at the US Open and Kennan win at the Australian Open, she almost realized that, well, hang on, these players are only 2 years older than me. That this is actually my time to be able to feature in some of these things. So it'll be interesting to see if she can carry that forward consistently. I mean, at 4-6 love 4 yesterday, I thought she had taken a small step backwards, but then the response there to be able to do it and to come back from a tricky position, and she did so, I think, in the second set against Samsonova at St. Petersburg as well, is that she's finding ways to get things done when perhaps things are against her. And I guess for her now, it's a matter of, yes, she can do that, but she needs to be able to kind of keep the foot down when she's in front as well, and can continue on and take control. I guess, yeah, Shelby Rogers and Sloane Stephens were probably the biggest upsets of today, both losing in straight sets.
Yep.
And I think everything else looked to have gone relatively to plan. And then as we're talking at the moment, we've got Christina McHale, who's up 5-2 on Davis, which is a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought Davis was probably the deserving favourite for that match. But it'll be interesting to see. Again, there's probably a little bit of pressure for these two, considering the draw and how it's opened up. So it does kind of work both ways, that there's a big opportunity now for a few there. And I guess we can have maybe a little bit more of a look at the specific matches from Acapulco tomorrow. But what we might do now is, just because, I guess, considering it's in the evening in the US and we're coming into the afternoon in Australia, we'll have a little bit more of a look at Doha for this Periscope. Just because obviously there's a lot of matches, we've got the odds available, and we can have a bit of a chat through the 7 matches I think we have on the board from Doha. Obviously the news from earlier today that Elena, now I think it's Rybakina, I've been saying Rybakina, everyone says it a little bit differently. Anyway, she's withdrawn from her match with Ash Barty, so she won't be taking part today after her, I think she won at 8-6 in the third set tiebreak against Van Uytvanck with one of the best forehand passing shots you'll ever see. But she's pulled out, so she's probably off for a well-deserved rest, considering the amount of tennis she's played to start the year. Yep. I just got down the bottom there. So the weather there, so looking like it's going to be sunny, top of 24 degrees or 76 Fahrenheit. I thought I'd pop that in there for you noobs. And it's going to be windy again. So we're heading up to around about that 34 kilometers an hour throughout the afternoon. So just thinking, if you're trying to compare it to wind in other areas recently, you may remember those couple of windy days to start the Australian Open. We're not quite at that level, but it's still enough to impact, and something to consider when you're talking about some of those players who, do rely on really cleanly striking the ball. The first match on court we have, and this is probably one of the more interesting ones in my opinion, and anyone watching might get a little bit of insight into one of the plays I'll be writing up after we finish up here. We've got Yelena Ostapenko against Petra Kvitova. What are your thoughts, Noobs, I guess, on how these two have looked this week, and what did you think of Kvitova against Suarez Navarro overnight?
So you look at Kvitova's match. This is her first time playing after retiring in her previous tournament with a cold. She admitted at the beginning of the week she wasn't 100%, but was starting to feel a lot better. You look at this match and kind of the way it went, I got to watch a little bit of it. This seems kind of like a clean the rust off match to me. I mean, Kvitova comes out, gets broken early by Suarez Navarro, gets a little pressure there, but is unable to fight back in the first set. Wins the second set now. Only wins the second set 6-3, but had some chances to win that 6-1, 6-2. I think that was a little more dominant for her than the score would lead you to believe. And then the final set, handing out the bagel there. I mean, just getting comfortable. In a match there, she lost a set. She still won 70% of points on first serve, 80% of points on second serve. That's really impressive. Was able to generate 9 break points, converted almost half of them with 4. So some nice numbers from her, a pretty solid performance. But again, who knows? Maybe she's feeling healthy. Maybe she's not feeling healthy. I think that, when you are carrying an illness like that, I think you don't feel it necessarily your first match. It's that second match, that third match, as your body is unable to recover as quickly as you're used to it. And you're still carrying that illness, and you're not necessarily getting better, and you're not getting, the rest that you necessarily need. So I think that you have some of those compounding effects. But at the same time, she's one of, if not the best tennis players in the world.
Yep.
And this surface isn't too bad for her. We talked about it being a little bit slow, but she has the game for that, and she knows how to adjust for these situations. She doesn't have the best movement in the world, obviously, but she's crafty and knows how to take advantage of positions. And she's playing Ostapenko, which is we talk about variability, and for anybody who's a statistical person, you talk about, your distribution of outcomes. And Ostapenko probably is the widest distribution of outcomes of just about any tennis player. She could lose any match 6-0, 6-0. She could win any match 6-0, 6-0. So what are you seeing here? I think you like the dog, if I was hearing you right earlier.
Yeah, I think, and as you were talking about that distribution of outcome, I think it is very, very wide, but I think it might be narrowing ever so slightly. I think Marion Bartley in the coaching team seems to have made an impact pretty quickly, I guess. I saw her play Bencic in Melbourne, and just her demeanor on court, she just looked to be enjoying tennis again. I think it was, she really struggled after winning, obviously, the French Open a couple of years ago, and struggled with that title, I guess, that came with it, of being the hunter became the hunted in a big way. Obviously, she started the year with a family tragedy, losing her father, and not being able to play those tournaments before the Australian Open. But I guess everything from there, she seems to have built quite well. And I think, the wind today, I think it's probably more of an issue for Petra than it is for Ostapenko. Kvitova it'll be around about a 20-hour turnaround from her match against Suarez Navarro, which, considering she's not coming off much tennis, it is a quick turnaround for her. I think the prices, and looking at it at the moment, I think Kvitova probably is a little bit short. The hard court, as we did say, was a little bit slower, and with that as well, Ostapenko's made the final here before. We know, from her clay efforts, that she's not fazed by the slower conditions, and certainly has the power to hit through any type of court really on her day. I just think she's almost presenting as a little bit of value. She was dominant against Stritzova yesterday, and I actually made the comment after her match against Teichmann. I'm sorry, I don't know if I got the pronunciation right either. That she did really well. It was one of those ones, I guess, if you think about in the past, Ostapenko serving at 2-3, 3-4, 4-5 in a final set, you'd get quite worried that, things were about to capitulate and we were going to see double faults. But, she handled it all really well, and then was able to break at 5-all, and then put herself in a position from love 15 to, win 4 points in a row and get the win. And it just seems like those situations that were perhaps a little bit more difficult in the past for her in 2019 seem to be kind of panning out a little bit better for her now. But yeah, I think that the key thing is that she just seems to be enjoying her tennis a little bit more, and I think that will play a big role in her pushing back towards the top of her game, because I think, at her best, as you said, with that distribution of outcome, her best can beat, you'd almost say, anyone on their day. It's just a matter of whether things, and I guess my only concern for her is maybe whether the wind can wreak a bit of havoc for her second serve. But I think that'll be the same for Kvitova, and we know Ostapenko can strike a ball very hard on the return, and won't be afraid. And a match that comes to mind is when she was starting to round into form at the end of last year. She was able to beat Karolina Pliskova, I think it was, in the indoors over in China. And that's looked like where we were, starting to see her turn a corner. So I think she's probably worth considering here. She's got good form in the past, and Petra may not be as concerned about the overall outcome here as much as just getting a bit of time on court and finding that consistency in her game. Do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, my only other thought would maybe just to be kind of take a step back and talk maybe a little more about the impact of wind. For those of you that don't know, obviously to serve your tennis ball, you got to do, the toss up in the air. And, for a lot of players, wind adds maybe not necessarily more difficulty, but just variance. It's that little bit of difference. The ball's an inch to the left, an inch to the right. you have a big gust coming at you, maybe you get something in your eye. It's just, it adds more variance. It adds more things that are out of the control of the players. And when you have a situation like that, essentially what you're doing is increasing the opportunity for the underdog, because when there's more randomness at play, it's less about the skill and the better player kind of, enforcing their will upon the game, and, the numbers themselves kind of working out. So tomorrow is going to be a pretty good day to look at the dogs. And, again, you start to look at some of the pricing, which is really what we're here to do. I mean, I'm seeing Ostapenko as good as plus 195, 2.95, if you will. You start to look at the implied probability of that. If you can get a 2.95, she only has to win the match 34% of the time. I think that in the conditions we're going to have tomorrow, slow courts, windy, Kvitova possibly carrying some illness, I think that you can make a good case that that's a little bit understated. So I think I'm with you. I was a little hesitant pre-match, but you've done it. You've talked me into it. I think I'm going to jump on board with a little Ostapenko here.
But I think with that, and something that's also worth considering is, whilst I've thought a lot about taking Ostapenko to win the game, the match outright, at no time have I really thought about taking her with the plus games. I think, and you've spoken about this in the past, that there is so much volatility with Ostapenko that when you look at that, the odds you're getting and the implied probability, I'd much rather be siding with Ostapenko at that bigger price to win outright than try my luck at her covering the game handicap, 51% of the time, or whatever it is that you're going to end up with from an odds and probability standpoint. So I think she's one that, her best will win, and it feels like it's either an Ostapenko win or Kvitova might do what she did to Suarez Navarro in that second and third set yesterday. We'll head on to the next match, which we've got a bit of the old versus the new. We've got Anisimova versus Kuznetsova. Bit of an interesting one here, contrasting styles. Anything jump out to you early?
The line is what jumped out to me early. I expected Anisimova to be a pretty solid favorite here. I'm seeing her anywhere between 145 and 155, which is right around like 1.7 to 1.65 if you're doing decimal odds. And I thought Anisimova would be closer to like minus 200, 1.5 here. Maybe not that big of a favorite, but much bigger than what we're seeing here. And you start to think about, again, not only the name recognition of Anisimova, somebody who was, a huge standout last year, performed really well in some major tournaments. But, you look at her wins. She beats Alexandrova in the first round, who's had a fantastic season. She smokes Svitolina in the second round. And now she's playing Svetlana Kuznetsova, who's, somebody that was popular and maybe pretty famous 3-4 years ago, but, coming back from injury. I'm sure I can't remember if she was an injury or maternity leave, but coming back from a long leave to the game, very talented, mentally very strong. But again, I think there's some value here in Anisimova. But anytime my pricing is this far off, again, I'm seeing, let's call it 1.67, call it 1.65, maybe even. I would probably have it closer to 1.5, 1.55. And then the spread's 2.5 games. I think this should be at least 3.5, maybe 4. So can you figure out why maybe I'm so far off from the market here? Does this line make any sense to you, I guess?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And I wonder if, at what point do we start to acknowledge that a win over Svitolina isn't worth a lot at the moment on current form? We know what she can do at her best, but we know that she's nowhere near her best at the moment. I guess, and this is something that I'd be interested in, it's hard to find kind of ways to be able to calculate and look into this, but I'd be fascinated to see what Kuznetsova's record is like over the last couple of years against, players under 21. I think she has that variety with her game to be able to put a bit more pressure on consistently in different ways. I think we see, a lot of players at the moment, they have their plan A, which works really well sometimes, but if it doesn't work, their plan B is to just do plan A a little bit harder. I think Kuznetsova has a bit more variety with her game to be able to, change things up, use a bit of slice, change direction a little bit more. And I think she's got the tennis IQ to kind of figure that out. I think she did that at the Australian Open against Vondrousova. I think she was looking in all sorts of trouble and was able to get over the line in the first round there. Lost to Georgie, I think, in the second round, who just blasted her off the court. I guess one of the matches I'm looking at from a recent form is St. Petersburg, where she played Brady and won 6-3, 6-1. And I just wonder, in terms of relative styles, you could start to kind of put Brady and Anisimova in a similar kind of group. I mean, they're not the same, but it's that's incredibly one-sided considering the power and pace that Brady can produce and the form of Brady. Outside of that, we saw what she could do in Dubai last week. I think it's a bit of a tricky one, and it's Kuznetsova is probably one I'm going to be not actively avoiding, but I guess it's I'm not going to be looking to heavily oppose her if she's in decent form. I don't think I would end up with a play on this match in particular, but I'm fascinated in these conditions. I know Anisimova handled the wind relatively okay. I think she played on a windy day at Roland Garros against Barty, I think in that semi-final. The wind doesn't seem to phase her, but I just wonder if, beating Svitolina isn't the best form lines based on what we've seen from Svitolina recently.
Hey, the more I look at it, the more I feel like there's just something I'm missing here. Because again, the line doesn't make sense to me. And I've got odds portal up here. Kuznetsov actually took money when it opened. It opened plus 135. She got all the way down to plus 118, and then Anisimova took some more money after that. But the market opened short and then actually got shorter as it went. So I think that I'm going to stay away. I think maybe there's again the wind, the speed of the courts. Like you said, the Svitolina name is more of a name win, frankly, based on the way she's been playing in the last few weeks. But just a little confused here. So I think for me, this is a stay away.
Yeah. And speaking of stayaways, we might jump to the next one, which is Kiki Bertens versus Zheng Sasai. I know you're not a big Kiki Bertens match involver. And when you do, it normally doesn't end very well.
Terrible.
So perhaps we maybe don't discuss this one in too much detail because I don't want to convince you into anything. But I guess it's worth noting that Zheng was pretty solid from a set down against Vondrousova earlier in Doha. And I wonder again whether, looking at this match and looking at Zheng the other day, whether that was kind of the wind playing a factor there as well. Helped her come over the line there from, what looked to be a pretty average position there.
I think that would be the angle you were going to take if you're going to take Zhang. I mean, Bertens has been playing some fantastic tennis, coming off the title in St. Petersburg. Beat Rybakina there in the final pretty convincingly. Beat Mahova in the first round here without really any trouble whatsoever. And I really respect Mahova in her game. I was actually I had some money on Mahova there as well, so I'm already 0-1 against Bertens this week. But you make a case for the wind, you make a case for the conditions, and you start to look at some of the pricing. Again, I'm seeing Zhang here, a huge underdog, plus 335. You're talking about an implied probability below 30% there. I mean, does Kiki Bertens really win this match 70, almost 75% of the time, you think?
Probably on form. I think the thing you could probably put against Kiki over the last couple of years is that she has played a really heavy schedule and probably gone to parts of the world and tournaments that other top 10 players perhaps wouldn't spend a lot of time. Is probably the best way for me to word that. I think what's a positive step for her this year is that before the St. Petersburg final, she had already withdrawn from Dubai and she'd made that call. She's like, right, I'm not going to play. I'm going to actually take that week off and then look to Doha this week. I think there's more money on the line this week too. And, it is a competitive field, but, looking at the withdrawals we had beforehand and, just how everything's set up, I think, without reading too much into it, the fact that she didn't play last week helps her here. Because I think she has had that tendency to kind of play a little too much and then kind of overcomplicate things, I think, as well. So interesting to see how that one unfolds. And, I could think of a lot of things I'd rather do than play Zheng in the wind. But one of those things I would rather do, it's certainly not betting on that match. That's for sure.
There's a lot of better ways to spend your money. So maybe skip that one, folks.
Yeah. So, for example, involving yourself in a match with Yulia Putintseva. Why not?
You know you're going to get an effort.
Yep, she is up against Belinda Bencic. So following up from Putinseva's win over Elise Mertens, I think it was the defending champ, knocked her off yesterday. Now these two have had some pretty fiery encounters in the past. I think the match at the Australian Open they played a couple of years ago ended with a lot of yelling, swearing. I think a bit of gesturing to the crowd from Yulia. What are your thoughts here on this one? Considering, as we said before, windy, slower surface, does it bring Putintseva into it a little bit more?
I think it does. I think that the conditions really favor Putintseva. I think that Bencic. I think at some point we're going to hear about some sort of injury she's carrying. She just doesn't look right. You watch her move around. She seems to be very cautious and very careful about when she chases certain balls, when she doesn't. She's hitting some big shots, but the power doesn't look like it's there from what you're used to seeing. So I think this is maybe 75 to 80% of Belinda Bencic, and Yulia Putintseva can easily outwork that much of Belinda Bencic. And again, you look at the market here; the price is really close. Belinda Bencic minus 130, right around 1.77. I think that ends up being,
Yep.
And Yulia Putintseva plus 105. I mean, 6 months ago, Bencic would be minus 175 in this match. Pretty close to 1.5, frankly, in a lot of scenarios. So, I think the market sussed this one out. I think the price looks really good here. And the only play that I'm looking at, 21 and a half, I'm seeing as a total. That is a huge total. If they can finish this match in 2 sets, it's going under that number. So lean under here, if anything. But I think, again, this price, if anything, speaks volumes about, Bencic, kind of her current form. And, like I said, I think at some point in the next week or so, maybe there'll be a little news about Miss Bencic, a possible break during the clay season, as she's one I think to normally take that off. So keep your eyes peeled for that.
Yeah, and I guess with Bencic, how much is it carryover from? I mean, she was wiped off the court by Kontaveit in Melbourne. It was absolutely just taken out, and it was under an hour, I think, almost in the end. It was one of the more surprising results, I think, of that whole fortnight. I guess you wonder how much carryover is there of that, combined with, she was the defending champion last week and couldn't deliver. Is it a combination of that as well as, looking at is Putinseva's form actually stacking up here, and are bookmakers really taking into account that win over Mertens?
Yeah, I think they are. And again, you look even further back for Bencic here. Go back to the Australian Open. She gets smoked by Kontaveit, loses to Leylah Fernandez in the Fed Cup, only wins one match in St. Petersburg over Kuznetsova 2-0, then loses to Sakkari in 3, loses to Pavlyuchenkova in 3 in the first round in a tournament where she's defending really big points again in Dubai, and then struggles in 3 sets. I mean, Kudermetova is a really great player, and I don't necessarily downgrade that at all. Maybe that is her finding a little bit of form, but again, I watched a good amount of that, and she really, I think, was picking her spots. Something's not right with her, and I think we've seen that all season, and hopefully, again, she takes some time to kind of figure things out. But I think the market's got this one right. I think this would be a great spot for Putintseva, but again, the price maybe prohibits making a move.
Yeah, I was hoping for a slightly longer, I think, for Putintseva when I saw these two were going to be meeting each other here. I don't think I could comfortably go for Bencic in any capacity on form, and I think she's one of those ones you just need to see a bit more from her before jumping in. And it's not that Bencic could win 6-2, 6-2 today, and I'm not going to sit there and go, oh, well, that was a missed opportunity. I think it's just acknowledging that some players you need to see a bit of form from, and I haven't seen that from Bencic to start the year. Next, I mean, in terms of quality of tennis and the matchups that we have for Doha tonight, it's they just keep coming. I mean, when you compare it to Acapulco as well, there's some really big names here. So next we have Sakkari versus Sabalenka, another interesting matchup of styles. And I guess as that ticker says down the bottom there, that that with the wind picking up, we saw Sabalenka struggle in Melbourne against Suarez Navarro in windy conditions. It'll be interesting to see how this one shapes up considering the form of Sakkari. Do you think Sakkari can continue what she's been able to produce to start 2020?
Absolutely. She's played just about as good a tennis as anybody. Doesn't necessarily have some of the big results of a lot of other players, but I thought she's looked really great. And again, we've talked about this a bunch already. The conditions here are great for her. Slow
Mm-hmm.
courts, wind really messes up Sabalenka. I'm a huge Sabalenka fan, and this is a really, really tough spot for her. Again, you start to look at the pricing here. Sakkari, a pretty big dog. I'm seeing, I think it was around plus 180, maybe plus 185, so 2.8, 2.85, if you will. I think this is a great spot for Sakkari. I think that
Mm-hmm.
if she's going to, really start to make big moves up and win premier level tournaments, this is the time. I think that, again, the conditions set up beautifully for her, and I think this is a good chance for her to advance. So lean in Sakkari here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think when I wrote my preview to start the week, when I just kind of picked a player that I thought would be most likely to, at their price, go all the way, I was very keen on Sabalenka. The wind does worry me, and she wasn't great for periods against Kontaveit last round. And when you look at what Sakkari's been able to produce to this point, she was very solid in that first round. Struggled a little bit overnight, but she's definitely one that when you consider that she's either won or she's lost in 3 sets this year. So she's not getting kicked off the court in convincing fashion in any way. And her losses have come to Sabalenka last week. I think it was to Kvitova at the Australian Open, and I think it was Vekic and maybe Bencic. Anyway, that we're looking at
Right, Bikina.
Osaka in Brisbane. I think I was there for that one. When you look at those names, she's not, she's holding her own against anyone she comes up against. So, Sabalenka would really want to be on with her serve, otherwise it could potentially get a little bit ugly.
Yeah, I think again, all the value here lies in the underdog. I don't know if I'm ready to make a move yet, but
Yep.
I think it's a definitely stay away from Sabalenka. If you're a daily fantasy player, don't use her tomorrow. If you're a big parlay person, do not put that money line in your parlay. This would be a good one. I think I'm looking at the timing here. Yep, I'll be up tomorrow watching this. So I think maybe what I'll try to do is get something in live. If again, the wind does look really bad and Sabalenka does look like she's having some some struggles, I'll hopefully get her to hold serve in the first or second game and then grab some Sakkari live.
Yep, sounds good. Now I've got 2 more matches from Doha. So this is another one I really want to talk to you about, and it's something I've been looking at probably for a couple of hours today. We've got Karolina Pliskova against Ons Jabeur. Early thoughts for you? Have you had a bit of a look at this match, or how you think it might pan out?
Yeah, I've got 2 plays already in this match. I like the over 21 games, and I like Jabeur here.
Yep.
Pliskova is a nice player, but I don't know. I'm trying to think of a nice word to say this. She kind of plays like a goon. She just goes out there. She's going to blast big serves past you. She's going to try to set up that forehand and hit some nice big forehands behind you, but doesn't really have much of a plan. Isn't really trying to attack any of your weaknesses or do anything creative. She lost Conchita Martinez. I forget who her coach is now, but not somebody as good as Conchita. So you start to think about the opponent. I mean, Ons Jabeur is one of the most clever, mentally sound tennis players that there is. We joke all the time, if we could take her brain and put it in, like Sloane Stephens' body, good Lord, like it's over. It's just, she would win a Grand Slam every other year for the rest of her career. She'd just be one of the top 3 to 5 tennis players in the entire world. But, that's not the case. But I think she's a huge threat to win this match. And I think that the market's just way, way off on this one. Again, plus 215 is what I'm seeing for Jabeur, and I love that. What do you think?
Yep. Yeah, I think this is a really interesting matchup of styles, and it was a match I actually got involved in at the US Open last year when these two met, and I was on Jabeur that day. And the US Open, by all reports over the last couple of years, has been on the slower side when you're talking about a hard court, so it is a little bit comparable to here. Obviously a little bit windier today, but on that day, I think it went to 6-4 in the third. Pliskova got the victory, and a lot of it came down to break point conversion or saving. That day, Pliskova faced, I think it was 23 break points for the match, but could come out and save 18 of them, and that turned out to be the difference. So I think, anyone who can generate 23 break points against the Pliskova serve is generally, you're heading in the right direction and you're on the right track to be able to, look to be figuring things out. Couple with that, the fact that Jabor's probably playing better now than she was then, and Pliskova has maybe dropped off a level a touch. And this looks to be, I'd be pretty comfortable making a play on Jabor. Still trying to finalize kind of units and where we're sitting. But again, in a similar way, probably to the Ostapenko one, I'm more inclined to go with the head-to-head price. I think that's where the value lies in this one.
Yeah, the spread I'm seeing right around 4, and the +4 games for Jabor is pretty expensive. Instead of your normal 1.9 or -110, I'm seeing 1.83 or -120. And although with kind of two big servers here, I would normally actually like the spread, but if I'm paying that extra little price, I want the 4.5 and not the 4. So I think the value does lie again in that money line, and again the total. I'm seeing 21 games here. With Pliskova's serve, with Jabor's ability to again, maybe generate some breaks, but also a good enough serve to hold herself. I think there's a good chance we get a 7-5 or even a 7-6 set here.
Yep.
So I like that number as well. But again, the two main markets I've already attacked, that money line and the total. I think you're right. The spread would be something, again, like I said, against Pliskova, a big server, that makes sense, but not quite in this case based on the pricing.
Yeah. And something I'd like to see, I think, from Jabor is perhaps coming off her level a little bit with her first serve and dropping that pace back and looking to hit spots a little bit more. I think, a lot of people and a lot of players that come up against Pliskova find their way into this kind of, well, I'm going to try and hit this as hard as I can to try and match it with you. And I don't think that necessarily works the best with Pliskova. I think if you can hit your spots, get her moving side to side, and try and draw her either in off the baseline a little bit or keep her on the run, I think that's where hopefully that will be the difference. But that's not something I would consider, I guess, from a trying to handicap this, because I am not inside Jabor's brain or inside the brains of her team. So whilst it's a great idea, I guess it's a matter of perhaps at the start of the match seeing what that first serve percentage is like, because if that first serve percentage, if she is going for too much and it drops, it's going to be really difficult for her, I think. And we'll wrap up the Doha preview with, again, another really interesting match of two big hitters here. We've got Muguruza versus Yastremska to finish off. Early thoughts, I guess, yeah, when I had a look at it, I thought it was probably going to be coin flip odds, and we've got pretty much close to that. What are your thoughts on, have you thought about a side or a total or anything jumping out?
I think, like you said, this is priced pretty correctly. If you're watching this live and they're holding serve back and forth, and you get a chance to maybe grab some Yastremska +125, +130. That's, I think, a really nice price and a really great opportunity. But this is just a really fun match to watch. I think this could be the two players that may have taken the biggest step forward during the offseason. Muguruza is an entirely different player than she was last year. Like I mentioned, Conchita Martinez not working for Pliskova anymore, now helping Muguruza. Just keeping her steady. Again, she looks like she has a plan out there. She looks comfortable. And Yastremska picks up Sasha Bayin. And despite how you feel about him and all the other goofy stuff he does outside of the tennis court, all of his players, again, come prepared. They come calm. They come ready. And Yastremska looks like a much different player. So I think this is going to be a ton of fun to watch. I think you're going to see an outrageous amount of highlights. Our buddy at Double Fault, I think it's at Double Fault 28 or whatever, is just going to probably have a ton of gifts from this match. So this is definitely a popcorn match. This will be on right at lunchtime, our time tomorrow. So I will be watching this when I have a lunch. It's going to be pretty spectacular. But yeah, from a betting angle, money line looks right. Total sitting at 21.5. If you really had to make a bet here, over 2.5 sets, I think is right around +150 or 2.5. That might not be the worst look in the world, but this will be a watch more than an investment for me.
Yeah, I think I'd probably tend to agree with that one. Look, I've had a couple of goes at either getting on Muguruza's side or against her over the last fortnight, and it hasn't quite panned out for me. I thought about taking Kasatkina against her the other day just because of Kasatkina's counter-punching ability. Then, Muguruza manages to win in 3 sets whilst facing 30 break points, I think it was. So, I'm happy to sit one out and just watch. I think this is going to be a really fascinating match, and it's going to give us a bit of a guide of gauge of where your strengths is at. I think we're starting to see, she's got the level, she's got all the shots, and she can bring it, for patches. It's just about finishing off matches like this one against Muguruza. So it will be interesting to see how that all pans out. So that is the 7 matches from Doha done and dusted. I think we did pretty well there. So just over 50 minutes to kind of get through all of that. What we might do just to kind of wrap up, and we got a couple of questions on Twitter earlier, and I've just put the call out on Twitter again, just for if anyone does have any questions. And I just put up, the best question for today. We'll get a month of free previews, which we'll see how that pans out from there. While some of the questions and maybe some people pop on from Twitter, we might start with a couple that came earlier. The first one is from Darius. His question was, who should we be looking to actively fade or back as we enter the clay season soon?
So looking through, I was kind of just scrolling down the rankings here a little bit, trying to see kind of what names popped out. Obviously Simona Halep, but she's been playing well. I don't think that there'll be any market adjustment there. The first name that I saw was Ekaterina Alexandrova, someone who's had a really great start to the season. Clay is not her surface. She is really going to struggle once she gets there. So try to forget how successful she's been the last couple months as we move into that season. Scrolling through the list again, just a little bit more. As bad as Sloane Stephens has been, last year she actually peaked a little bit during clay season, made the semifinals in Madrid, I think another semifinal or at least a quarterfinal, another big event. So there's definitely going to be some hold your nose, close your eyes, and take a little Sloane Stephens once we get there. Looking through again even a little bit further, Jennifer Brady has had a nice start to the year. Clay is a terrible surface for her. Got to wonder what she's going to be able to do on that surface this year, especially also as her level started to tick down even just a little more. Jill Teichmann is someone I'm going to bet on a ton this year during the clay season. I thought she was great last year, won a bunch of ITF events, was really competitive in smaller WTA tournaments. Had a nice start to the year on the hard court season. Didn't win any events, but was really competitive, and I thought took a big step forward. That was a name I was excited to follow. Let me see who else here. As I start to flip through, I'm sure I skipped a couple others. Were there any names that came to your mind, Steve?
Yeah, look, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with a couple of those, and I guess it will probably be dependent a bit on matchups that we get early in the clay season. I think, looking at players like Rybakina and the likes who have had very successful.
Rybakina was the one name I missed.
I think Rybakina showed that she could play well on clay last year, and she has the game that can translate over to any surface. I'm just a little bit concerned that she perhaps doesn't represent a lot of value, just because she has played so well on the hard court. Obviously, it's a matter of, and it's a little bit trickier, I guess, for particularly in the WTA because there aren't the clay tournaments going on at the moment. But I guess from the ATP standpoint, you're getting those players at the moment, all of Nick Kyrgios's favorite players, as he refers to them as the dirt rats, playing over in Santiago at the moment. They're able to get time on court and get used to the clay. And I guess in the ATP side, it allows a lot more opportunities to kind of catch a couple of players that perhaps, are still adjusting to the surface versus players that have been on the surface for, a couple of weeks or a month. I think on the women's side, I'd need to see a little bit more from, obviously Pliskova has been disappointing and Svitolina has been disappointing through the hard court season. And I just think that their strengths don't quite translate over well to the clay. So they might be ones to kind of, not necessarily actively oppose, but I guess just be wary of to start things off on the clay. One that I guess would be interested in, and would have probably been more interested in had she not, made the Australian Open final, is, Muguruza has shown, in the past that she can move well and she can play really well on clay. So I guess she's one to keep an eye on as well. But it'll be interesting to see who kind of goes and plays those, heavy clay tournaments, who goes and plays on the green clay for a little bit, and how it all comes together in the lead up to the French Open.
Yeah, I was flipping through just seeing if there's any other names kind of on the out and outs. Tamara Zidansek is always a great name to keep in mind come clay season. Again, I'm starting to get in the higher ranks. Lara Arrobarena, once they get into South America, there's like 3 tournaments in a row in South America on clay. She does awesome in all 3 of those. I don't know why, but year in and year out, she's really good in those 3 tournaments. Just the other couple names I was seeing as I was kind of flipping down through, but I'm starting to get to like the 200, so I think we can skip that. But
and we might even do a Periscope kind of as we transition into that clay season, and figure out who some people are to keep an eye on, and who we think might make their way up the rankings as well. And that question actually works in really well with the second question from King Curios on Twitter. He said, "Are clay specialists getting better on hard courts? And if so, do we think that the markets are adjusting to that?" Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, I think that we are starting to see some clay players get better on hard courts. The other way that a lot of people would ask this question is, are hard courts getting slower? I think the answer to that is yes. You start to think, there are certain tournaments that are unabashedly slow. Indian Wells, Miami, the 2 biggest non-Grand Slam events are slow. They're not as slow as clay, obviously, but they have enough of a lack of speed where you start to get some other players to really bring it in. I think it speaks to, Simona Halep's ability, frankly, to win and be really competitive in some of these tournaments, when we thought of her a lot as kind of a clay court player. Her Wimbledon title, I know that's obviously not hard courts, but I think that speaks to not only the quality of her game, but the fact that tournaments are getting a little bit slower. Wimbledon, there was even complaints there. So I think as the courts get slower and slower, and you do start to see some value in things like that. Like, I'm trying to remember what the line for Zidansek was in the first round of this event against Kalinskaya, but I think it was pretty close to a pick 'em. And if we were on clay, Zidansek would have been minus 200, maybe minus 250 against Kalinskaya. Probably a little too exaggerating there, but I think that's a really great point. I think you are starting to see that, and I think don't be afraid to back these players that do better on clay, that are a little more movement based. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, and it comes back to kind of what you said at the start there. I think a lot of it comes to the surfaces that we're seeing there. I think the slower, there's that, not necessarily a desire, but I think seeing that more consistent product across all of the surfaces is probably something that may be going on potentially in the background. And I guess it's you want players to be able to play on all surfaces and have that translate across, so people are playing year round. I think what they would like to avoid in the future, I guess, is probably the likes of what we're seeing now with Roger Federer, in terms of he's just not going to play clay tournaments. And there are some players, and there are a lot of challenger players that will only play clay tournaments, and I think they want a product that's going to be, you're going to see it consistently across the 12 months. No one wants to see an entire clay season without a couple of the top 10 players in action. So I think there is a little bit of thought, I guess, with it there. I think it's more about, I guess, the second part of it with the markets adjusting. Yeah, look, it's probably more figuring out. I think they're adjusting. They're probably not adjusting entirely, and I think it's that maybe it's those players, and the players, it's easier to make that transition from clay to hard than it is from hard to clay. And I just wonder if a couple of those players, and I guess one that stands out particularly this week is Pedro Martinez could have played in Chile and made the main draw quite comfortably, but all of a sudden he's over here in Acapulco. He's playing the bigger tournament. And he's actually, he won today against Albot, and he's looking pretty solid. I saw him live in Melbourne against Medvedev, and his game seems to translate quite well. So I hope that we do see that, but I don't want it that every week's going to be the same old, same old. I think we do need a little bit more variety, and I think maybe at the moment we see more variety, perhaps when we're talking about altitude, which is something that they can't control as much as perhaps surface speed, particularly on the hard courts. And it's something interesting to kind of keep an eye on, as we transition over to the clay and then back to the hard court, into that kind of pre-US Open stretch where players have that decision of where they'd like to play. Now, I've just got a question that's popped up onto Twitter. Is there ever value betting Nick Kyrgios in a slam?
Yes, as an underdog against a famous player.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. I don't think there is any outright. I think he's more a specific match type player. Best of 5 sets, 7 matches in a row. Good luck. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. And it's tennis is all about mental strength and consistency, and that's not what you think of when you think of Nick Kyrgios. And again, the men's game is so tough. He's got to beat Djokovic, or he's got to beat Nadal, or he's got to beat Federer, or he's got to beat Medvedev, or one of those really, really fantastic players. But I like betting Nick Kyrgios in some of those big matches. Again, if he's playing somebody he has feelings about or has statistical significance or importance. I mean, one of my biggest men's tennis bets of the year was him, plus the games and the over against, I think it was Nadal. I think it was in the Australian Open maybe, but, went 4, I think, long sets, maybe even 5 sets. And it was really never in doubt because he turns it up. He takes it to another level. He just seems to be really motivated. So I think those are the positions, but you're dead on. I mean, we're not betting on him to win a Grand Slam anytime soon. I mean, maybe he'll compete for a Wimbledon someday, but not yet.
Yep. I agree with you there, and I think he's one of those players where you look at his record and how well he can and what he can produce in best of 3 against those top players. I'd love to see him play Djokovic in a final of an ATP 500 or a 1000. Whereas I probably don't want to see him play best of 5 sets against him at the moment. And a lot of it comes back to Kyrgios is obviously happy with where he's at and what he's doing, and it's one of those ones that we can see the talent there. It's more an application thing, but at the end of the day, if he's he's just going to do what he wants to do, and there's a few like him at the moment that are producing some pretty solid tennis. Look at Bublik and a couple of other guys there that. That I guess their application week to week hasn't been to the same level as the likes of maybe a Nadal or a Djokovic, but they're still they've earned their ranking, and I guess they can. That's up to them as to what they want to do. But I think that best of 5 is probably still a little bit too much for him, and he's one that I probably more look to in a as you said, in a head-to-head standpoint is. In a particular match is probably more appealing for me than thinking that, trusting his body to get through 7 best of 5 set matches. Because I think it's that ability to back up match after match where things can get a little bit difficult. And a question that's just come through from Misha Carr, which I'll pop up. Is he a safe bet over Ugo Humbert tonight?
Probably not. I don't know a ton about men's tennis, but I've never really heard of Ugo Humbert. So my guess is Nick Kyrgios doesn't have any sort of preconceived motivation. So
maybe. I mean, he's coming back from injury, and whether it was an injury or not, look at it's questionable. He's pulled out of the last couple of tournaments. I think he's still on probation. I think that's still a thing. I think he'd be getting close to the end of the 6 months, but he'd hate to come all this way through his suspended time and end up being banned for an extended period of time. I think probably part of it is he's back and playing this week because he's the defending champion. He's got a lot of this is a lot of points for him to defend this week. We saw some really impressive performances from him against the likes of, he's saved match points against Nadal here. A year ago, he beat Zverev, I think it was, in the final. It's questionable, and that he got through and won this tournament last year, but Acapulco is known for its nightlife, and he was out at wherever until 3 a.m., 4 a.m. between matches. That's just what he does, and I think I'll just pop another comment up here on the screen while we're talking about it. Probably fair that Nick Kyrgios and Safe Bet don't have much of a direct correlation. And
I'm saying,
again, looking at Kyrgios is around that $1.40 for tonight. I probably wouldn't be including him strongly in any capacity there. And I made a comment at the start of the week when I went through and talked about a couple of the Australians on the solo show that these players that are returning from injury, making a final or winning may not be the end point of that week one. It's about getting back on court. Alex de Minaur is another example. First game back from the ATP Cup, was up a set on Kekmanovic and fell away. And, it's a bit of a fitness issue as well there because he hasn't played a lot of tennis and he relies on his fitness. I think it's a really tricky spot for even a player like a de Minaur. So once you add Nick Kyrgios' name into the equation, it kind of blows up and becomes something more. And I just hope, for the sake of Kyrgios, and this is from an Australian standpoint, that he puts in a half decent performance today, because if he doesn't, then I'm going to have to read about it tomorrow in the news that he threw his racket, or he had a beer on the side of the court, or he, kicked over the Gatorade
it's more
tub.
shameful than a murderer.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he's still ranked higher on the villain list than Aaron Hernandez, so that's still, one of my many issues with with the media and how they cover tennis. There are some good, and there's also some not so good. And I think we've got one more question, and then we might wrap it up. It was from, who have we got here? Chief Fun Stuff on Twitter, who said, "What's the ceiling for, or what do we think the ceiling is?" That's another ATP question. Felix Auger-Aliassime. Do you want me to
I
handle
like
this
his
one?
game a lot.
Yeah.
I'll jump in and then I'll let you kind of finish. A little bit of him that I watch, he seems to have just about every skill that you could want.
Yep.
I think it's pretty well known at this point how poorly he's done in finals. So obviously some big mental steps forward for him to take, but he's very young and he's got a ton of talent. He seems to want to work hard. So I'm optimistic, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think you look at his body frame, his movement, his shots. He's got all the tools. It's just about using the right tools at the right time consistently. A lot's been said about the fact that he's 0-5 in ATP finals, and he's still young. He's 19, isn't he? I think he's still very young. He's got a lot of time ahead of him. He's not. I don't see him going down the Julien Benneteau kind of path of not claiming a title. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. I also think he's got favorable, in terms of a lot of those players at that age, he has that favorable media presence, and a lot of the stuff that comes across from him is quite positive. I guess an example is you look at the run he made at the start of last year. This time of year, he went and played the South American Clay Tour. So he went on a run, I think made a final, played pretty well, and bumped his ranking up considerably. All of a sudden, an Italian in Gianluca Mager does that last week, and he's getting slammed from everywhere for, I think the term was vulturing an ATP 500. I mean, I don't think vulturing is the right term for that. I think everyone had the ability to enter that tournament. He's just decided that, as a clay courter, he might enter the tournament that's based on clay. So, yeah, I think...
Seems like something I would think about doing if I were him.
Yeah, so I think he's obviously, he got through that without any kind of negativity, bumped up his ranking, is now in a position to, he'll sit in the top 20, top 30 for the next decade if he keeps himself fit. I think he almost has a higher ceiling than Shapovalov. I mean, I'd be remiss to talk too much about Canadian tennis without Jorge present, who does like to give his opinion all things Canadian as a Canadian. But I think he has all the tools and it translates across all surfaces better. We're seeing what he can do on indoor hard court the last couple of weeks. We've seen what he can do on clay last year. I saw what he could do on outdoor hard court. Was it Miami? I can't remember which tournament he made a deep runner. He lost to Isner in the semi, I think it was. It's just about kind of getting everything to click for him, and I think it will. He's got time. He's got a lot of time, and I have no doubt that he will be winning his first title. I would imagine at some stage this year, but I wouldn't say it would be too far off.
Yeah.
And we've just had one more question sneak in from Baconator, who I think had followed a couple of things. His question is, what aspect of a player's game lends itself to more long-term consistent success in the WTA? I will hand this one over to you.
It's all right up there. It's what's between the ears, folks. You start to look at your list of really successful WTA players, your Bianca Andreescu's, your Simona Halep's, your Petra Kvitovas, your Serena Williams's. It's not their overwhelming physical gifts. It's their tempered, consistent approach. They're taking their time, trying to win every single point, going out there with a plan, not getting too upset, not getting too excited. They celebrate some big points. People make fun of Kvitova for cheering a lot and Serena Williams for her scream and all that crap. But, that's kind of stuff that happens afterwards. While they're in the point, while they're actually playing, they're really composed. And I think that's what you need to be good at tennis at any level, not just the WTA level, because, again, you see that wide variety in games. The reason I like women's tennis is because I think that there is a much wider variety in styles and games and what you can kind of do from a tennis perspective and what you see. But the consistent players, the ones who win, are the ones that are real strong up here.
Yep. And I think that is such a key thing. And as I said, it's not all physical. If you wanted to watch, I will admit that I watched my first Riley Opelka match in about 6 months the other day. The only reason I watched it was because it was windy. I just wanted to see what he did.
How'd that go?
I mean, he won the tournament, so he did pretty well.
It's not bad.
But yeah, he wasn't. It actually looked like he almost played better in the wind. It made him concentrate a little bit more on his backhand, and it was a little bit cautious from both sides. But I think it, as you said, it's that ability to get yourself into a position on the women's side to be considered a force, and then being able to utilize that and kind of, I'm not saying that players win matches on their surname alone, but I would imagine that, you look at Rybakina last week against Halep, I think she was up a break in that third set. Halep gets back into it because that she's, going to stay locked in and, be able to control that situation relatively well. You look at Serena Williams, it's her ability to build pressure just from her presence. I think that makes, she does get a bit vocal sometimes, but, if you've got it in your arsenal, why not use it? I think it's, no one's saying that you can't do it. And from that mental side of things, I think, to translate it over to the men, Kevin Anderson went on that run before he got injured where he was fist pumping after every point. It annoyed me watching, and I found it quite frustrating, but it worked. So why wouldn't he? I think that's what it lends to. Is it's not going to be your big serve. It's not going to be, I think it's that consistency in your game and that ability to remain on from point one to match point. That's where the key thing lies. And we might see things change a little bit in the next kind of 5 to 10 years as some of the better players become that little bit more powerful. But I think at the moment it's it's that ability to move pretty well, to be able to cover the court, but it's also that mental edge, I think, is a really big one. And another comment just up there was, can Andreescu kind of be considered in that group? she didn't play a
Maybe it's a
lot
little
last.
presumptive.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky one for her because she's ranked 4 in the world, but she didn't actually play a lot of tennis last year. When you think
Yeah, I
about
think
it.
when you go back and look at her year, you're right. She really only played hard courts. Didn't I don't think played any grass, if or maybe one clay event.
Yep.
Um, but by the end of the season, was the favorite to win any hard court tournament she entered.
Yep.
And yes, she doesn't have the years of success of some of those women, but I have no problem whatsoever putting her in that group. Maybe with the caveat, assuming her body holds up. Um,
Yep.
she has all the physical gifts and is already one of the mentally most sound players in the game. You just watch some of the situations that she's been through, and again, she doesn't have the career achievements, but when she's healthy, she's one of the 2 or 3 favorites to win any hardcore tournament, and one of the 5 to 10 favorites to win any WTA tournament.
Yep. And I think for her, it's a great example of she has the perfect balance of, if you think about the scale kind of from left to right, of she's got confidence, but it's like right on the boundary of towards arrogance. She's not, I don't think she's getting ahead of herself, but she's just confident enough to be frustrating. And you look at, I guess, the way that she can frustrate players with what she can do is it was either Miami or maybe it was Miami. I think she played Angelique Kerber, and Kerber basically shunned her at the net and didn't want a bar of talking to her and called her. I think she called
Yeah,
her something. Can't remember what it was.
yeah,
There was something. If you can get under the skin of Angelique Kerber, you're doing something right. So, as much as we look at it and we go, oh, that's a shame that they behave like this or that. At the end of the day, if it works and you can win Indian Wells and you can win the US Open, no one else remembers the other stuff at the end. When you go on to if you go and look at Andreescu's Wikipedia page at the moment, you look at there's a big W next to the US Open in 2019. You don't see had an argument with Kerber at the net. So, she's picking the times to be effective. And it'll be interesting actually to see how she goes when she comes back. Because she's getting towards that time now where you wonder is if she's coming back, for Indian Wells and you're defending a title on your first journey back, I'm just curious to see what prices that we might be seeing for Andreescu early on, because it is hard to gauge, because she does seem like a bit of a player that plays herself into form over a tournament that she might be a little bit under in terms of the odds when we first see her back.
Yeah, I'll be really curious to see her draw. And like you said, only played 11 tournaments last year, but won Auckland, won 3 matches in the Australian Open, won Newport Beach, which is a lower event, made the semifinals in Acapulco, won Indian Wells, won 3 matches the week after that in Miami. Only won 2 matches in Roland Garros, so she could play some clay. Won Toronto, won the U.S. Open, made the quarterfinals of Beijing, and then retired during the finals. So
Yep.
basically every tournament she was in, she made the quarterfinals or better and won almost half of them.
Yep.
Again, one being the U.S. Open. And again, you look at that U.S. Open win, it's, beats Wozniacki, beats Mertens, beats Bencic, beats Serena Williams in the final, and pretty convincingly so at that point. So, again, doesn't have the career achievement, but she will be favored. And when she comes back for Indian Wells, I think she, might not be the favorite for the tournament, but she'll be one of the 3 to 5 favorites. And honestly, I'll think about it. If I get a chance to bet her at double digits, I don't care that I
Yep.
haven't seen her play. I'm jumping at that.
Yep. Good one. And I've just noticed there is a question or two that are a bit more kind of betting specific around kind of when we look at match lines and things. And we might actually do that in perhaps a different episode entirely. So I will make a note of that question, or those couple of questions. We
Yeah,
might
we
just
talked
wrap.
about that a little bit in the
Yeah.
Ostapenko. So you can go back a little bit and hear some conversation around that.
Yeah. And I think we might wrap it up there. So what have we got? Just under 80 minutes. Thanks for those who've hung around. And we just thought we'd just pop up here. We know we've got a couple of time zones around, but obviously we've been able to chat today about Doha. Tomorrow we're going to jump over onto the Net Worth Pod Periscope and chat with some of the other guys. They've luckily let me come along for the ride tomorrow and have a bit of a chat about Acapulco and kind of where things are at for this week. So that is for Australians, I guess the east coast of Australia, it's 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time, and that is 4 p.m. Eastern in the US, if I'm right. Is that right?
We think so. Assuming Jorge's math is right, you could join us tomorrow. Follow at Net Worth Pod, and just, we don't necessarily start right at the top of the hour. We're a little bit slow sometimes, folks. We got to get somebody from California on at the same time as somebody from Toronto, at the same time as somebody in Philadelphia, at the same time as somebody in Melbourne, at the same time as somebody in Sweden. So a lot of things to arrange there. But sometime just shortly after, again, 4 p.m. Eastern in the United States, so Philadelphia, New York time, if you will, or 1 p.m. California time, or apparently 8 a.m. in the morning Melbourne time.
Yep.
Look out for us. We'll break down all the action tomorrow.
I'll probably still be having my coffee, and I'd imagine Jorge and maybe yourself might be having something a little stronger. We
It's
will.
possible.
Yep, it is. Anything is possible. What we might do, so we might wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Noobs, for jumping on and being the first guest on Ace Marks the Spot. Hopefully
Thanks
we
for
can do
having
this.
me.
Not a problem. Hopefully we can do this a little bit more often. And if you do, if anyone watching does find this stuff to be interesting or has any feedback, preferably constructive, but we accept all feedback here. Do get in touch with me on Twitter at ace_previews. So this goes out now on Periscope and YouTube. So we have a YouTube channel now. So that's a thing.
I made the YouTube.
Yeah. The other thing is, if you want on just sending me an email, I'm on my emails every day, ace@acetennispreviews.com. We will chat to you next time, and we'll see you tomorrow on the Net Worth Pod.
Have a great day, everybody, or a good sleep.
See ya.